The first thing that hit her was the smell. Not sterile lab ethanol or the sharp tang of fertilizer, but a cloying blend of temple incense, wet earth, and something floral undercut by the sour note of human sweat. The second thing was the pain. A sharp, throbbing ache at her temple, as if she'd been clocked by a well-aimed beaker. The third thing was the sound of crying. A desperate, hiccuping sob, inches from her ear. "Doctor." Melinda Lynn's eyes flew open. The world resolved not into the clean lines of her university lab, celebration confetti littering the floor after her PhD defense, but into a chaotic, rain-dampened courtyard. Gray brick walls. A heavy, leaden sky. And a scene that made her blood run cold. A man with the oily smile and sharp eyes of a pawnbroker was gripping the thin wrist of a girl who couldn't be more than 12. The girl, her face pale as moonstone, eyes wide with terror, was being pulled towards a waiting, curtained ox cart. A woman in a garishly embroidered robe, her face a mask of avaricious calculation, stood beside the man, counting out silver coins that chimed with a sickening finality. And Melinda knew, the body she was in was just standing there, holding a small, embroidered purse. Complicit. A flood of memories, not her own, slammed into her consciousness like a rogue data stream. Lynn Xiaomei. 18. Only daughter of the fading Lin gentry family of Fragrant River Town. Spoiled rotten. Vain. Her sole ambition, to marry up, specifically to the scholarly Shin Jiao, and restore her family's waning prestige. The family's ancestral fortune, derived from cultivating the precious Orient blossom, was crumbling due to a blight in the fields. The Mid-Autumn Gala was in 3 moons. Her engagement, and their social survival, depended on presenting a perfect, rare-grade blossom as a betrothal gift. They had none. So, the old Xiaomei, in a move of breathtaking cruelty and stupidity, had decided to sell her youngest cousin, Yingyue, to this artisan troupe to get the silver to buy one on the black market. The transaction was moments from completion. Wait. The word tore from May's throat, raw and unfamiliar. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the courtyard's tense atmosphere like a knife. The pawnbroker man paused. Yingyue froze, a spark of impossible hope flashing in her tear-filled eyes. The calculating woman, Madame Feng, looked up, her brows raised. May's mind, the cool, analytical part that had just defended a dissertation on symbiotic plant relationships, kicked into overdrive. This is wrong. This is trafficking. This is monstrous. The deal is off, May stated, her voice gaining strength. She stepped forward, her movements stiff in the unfamiliar, cumbersome silk robes. She dropped the purse of silver at Madame Feng's feet with a thud that sounded like a sentence. Let her go. A beat of stunned silence. Then, chaos. Xiaomei. Have you lost your mind? The shriek came from behind her. A plump, heavily jeweled woman, Mother Lin, barreled out of the main house, face flushed with panic and rage. That silver is for your blossom. For your future. For all of us. The pawnbroker's oily smile vanished, replaced by a cold, threatening glint. A deal is a deal, young miss. The girl is mine. The silver is yours. The contract is spoken. A contract for a human being is no contract, May shot back, surprising herself with the vehemence. She moved between him and Yingyue, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd never been in a fight in her life, but the sight of the girl's trembling form ignited a fury that felt ancient. It's a crime. Release her, or I will scream this courtyard down and bring the magistrate's guards down on your troop so fast your head will spin. She saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The threat of official attention, even in a town as seemingly lax as this one, was a potent one. Madame Feng's smile was icy. You'll be the laughingstock, girl. No blossom, no marriage. Your family will be ruined. And for what? This scrawny thing? She gestured dismissively at Yingyue. May didn't look away. She leaned in, pitching her voice low. You're right. She is scrawny. Sickly. She'll eat more than she'll earn for you in a year. A bad investment, Madame Feng. Take your silver and find a heartier stock. It was a brutal, calculating thing to say, and it made May's stomach churn. But she saw the logic register in the trafficker's eyes. Greed warred with pragmatism. With a disgusted snort, he shoved Yingyue forward, snatching the purse from the ground. Wasted my time, he grumbled, shooting May a look of pure venom. The Lin family produces nothing but fools and failures. Come, phone. Let's find goods worth the coin. They retreated to the cart, which creaked away into the misty lane, the curtain falling shut like a closing eyelid. The moment they were gone, the strength drained from May's legs. Inua stumbled into her, small hands clutching her robes, sobbing in relief. Aunt Xiaomei, you came back, you came back. May held her, patting her back awkwardly, her own breath coming in short gasps. What have I done? Mother Lin descended like a storm. You idiot girl. You sentimental, brainless little fool. She didn't strike May, but her words were lashes. That was our only chance. Xinjiao will never accept you without that blossom. We are finished. Do you understand? Finished. May looked over Inua's head at her mother's theatrics, at the anxious faces of her two elder brothers, Lin Tao and Lin Wei, peering from the doorway, at the hopeless slump of her father's shoulders where he stood silently in the shadows of the hall. This family was a sinking ship, and the old Xiaomei had just sold a passenger to buy a bucket. A strange calm settled over her. The panic of transmigration was receding, replaced by the clarity of a problem to be solved. A biological problem. An agricultural problem. A family problem. She gently pried Inua loose and stood up straight, meeting her mother's furious gaze. Mother, she said, her voice clear and carrying a new, unfamiliar authority. Buying a blossom is the act of a desperate, doomed house. Growing one, that is the act of a house that will endure. The courtyard went silent again, save for Inua's sniffles. Mother Lin blinked, her anger momentarily derailed by sheer incredulity. Grow one? You? You can't tell a weed from a watering can. You've never set foot in the mud in your life. Things change, May said simply. She looked towards the family's walled gardens, visible through a moon gate. The blight is in our fields. I will cure it. And I will cultivate an aureate blossom worthy of the gala myself. The declaration hung in the damp air, so outrageous it circled back from absurdity to a kind of startling audacity. Her brother Tao snorted a laugh. Her father sighed deeply, turning away. May didn't wait for their disbelief to solidify into mockery. Taking Inua's hand, she said, Come, little one. Let's get you something to eat. Half a bowl of gruel a day is an insult to a growing girl. As she led the stunned cousin inside, away from the gawking family, her mind was already racing. Cure the blight. Cultivate a mystical flower in 3 months with zero practical experience in this world. Easy. The ghost of her PhD supervisor's voice chuckled in her memory. Theoretical knowledge is worthless without application, Melinda. Well, application time had arrived. Later, alone in the hushed, failing garden, she knelt on the damp path, ignoring the filth on her fine silk skirt. She examined the afflicted plants. The aureate blossoms were supposed to have leaves of deep emerald veined with gold, and buds that held sunlight. These were stunted, leaves spotted with ugly gray lesions, their famous fragrance sickly sweet and faint. But at the edge of a diseased cluster, her botanist's eye caught it. A single, runt seedling, different from the others. Its gray lesion was smaller, contained, as if it had fought back. A natural resistance. A possible key. She reached out, her fingers brushing a velvety, stricken leaf. A faint, discordant energy, like a sour musical note, buzzed against her senses. This wasn't just a disease. It was a corruption. An imbalance. And Lin Mei, for the first time since she'd opened her eyes in this terrible, beautiful, impossible world, smiled. It was a small, sharp thing. All right, she whispered to the dying plants, to the mist, to the memory of a girl who would sell family for status. Let's see what we can do. The Lin family's breakfast hall was a theater of silent condemnation. The clink of porcelain spoons against coarse, gray rice congee was the only sound. May sat, back straight, feeling the weight of their stares like a physical pressure. Her father, Master Lin, kept his eyes fixed on his bowl, his face etched with the quiet despair of a man watching his legacy crumble. Her mother, Lady Lin, ate with furious, precise movements, each bite an accusation. Her elder brothers, Tao and Wei, exchanged glances that oscillated between bewilderment and resentment. Only little Inua, seated close to May, dared to sneak glances at her, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning worship. May ignored the congee. Her mind was a whirlwind of variables. The blight. Last night, by the light of a single oil lamp, she'd used a hairpin to carefully dissect a leaf from the ailing plant and the resistant sprout. Without a microscope, her analysis was primitive, but the signs were clear to her trained eye. The lesions weren't fungal in the classic sense, no fuzzy mycelium. They were necrotic, localized cell death. A toxin. Or a severe nutrient lockout. The indigo, she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. 4 pairs of eyes snapped to her. What did you say? Lady Lynn's tone was frosty. The Shin family's new indigo dye workshop. Upstream on the Silver Serpent River. May kept her voice level, analytical. They use vitriol and lime in the vatting process. The runoff is acidic. It's altering the soil pH in our lowest fields, where the water collects. The aureate blossom roots are sensitive. They can't uptake iron and phosphorus in acidic soil. That's why the leaves are chlorotic, turning yellow, and why the plants are susceptible to secondary infections, the gray lesions. A profound silence followed. It wasn't the silence of contemplation, but of utter, uncomprehending dismissal. Lin Tao, the pragmatic elder brother, broke it with a derisive snort. Vitriol? pH? Xiaomei, have you been reading Xin Jiao's alchemy texts and cooked your brain? The blight is a curse. A punishment for our grandfather's broken contract with the river spirit. Everyone knows this. It's not a curse, May insisted, the scientist in her rising to the bait. It's chemistry. We need to amend the soil. Add crushed limestone to neutralize the acidity. And we should interplant with sword fern. Its roots exude compounds that chelate iron, making it available again, and it acts as a physical barrier against soil-borne pathogens. Lady Lin slammed her spoon down. Enough. You sound like a mad geomancer. Our gardeners have tended these fields for 5 generations. We perform the rites to the Earth Mother every season. We do not put rocks and weeds in with sacred blossoms on the word of a girl who once cried because a ladybug landed on her sleeve. The old Xiaomei's frivolity was a weapon they kept using against her. May took a steadying breath. Then let me have a small plot. The one by the old well. To test my theories. What do you have to lose? It's already failing. Master Lin finally spoke, his voice weary. Do as you wish, daughter. That plot is dead anyway. But you will not touch the main gardens. And you will not shame us further with this peasant talk. He rose, his meal unfinished, and retreated to his study, a portrait of defeated dignity. It was permission, however grudging. It was all she needed. Her laboratory was a sorry patch of earth, its blossoms the grayish ghosts of their former selves. But to May, it was a canvas. She enlisted a terrified-looking Ingyue and, to her surprise, the family's youngest, laziest gardener's boy, Fu, who was more interested in watching clouds than pulling weeds. He was, she suspected, the only one not invested enough to report her every move to her mother. For days, she worked. She bartered a silver hairpin with a traveling mason for a bag of lime dust. She and Fu hauled buckets of water from the deep, clean well, not the river. She foraged for sword fern in the wooded hills behind the estate, Ingyue trotting behind her, slowly shedding her fear like an old coat. Her methods were a spectacle. She measured nothing by eye, using instead a consistent bowl 4 lime application. She had Fu dig specific, shallow trenches for drainage. She mashed fern roots into a slurry with rainwater, creating a tea that smelled of earth and green things, which she applied to the soil. The Maine gardeners watched from a distance, muttering about young Mrs. Mudplay and inviting worse spirits. Lady Lin took to having headaches whenever May passed by, smelling of soil and sweat instead of jasmine perfume. The gossip reached the town, of course. And it reached the Shin family compound. Xin Jiao's visit was announced with a formality that felt like a siege. He arrived in a sleek litter, accompanied by a single, sharp-eyed servant. He was exactly as the memories painted him, handsome in a carved ivory sort of way, with long fingers meant for holding brushes, not soil. His robes were of subtly patterned silk the color of a dusk sky, impeccable. He was received in the best receiving room, the one with the only remaining good carpet. Lady Lin was a fluttering bird of nerves and forced smiles. Master Lin was solemn. May was summoned from the garden, her nails rimmed with dirt, a smudge of earth on her cheek. Xiaomei, Xin Jiao said, his voice a smooth, cultured instrument. He didn't rise. His eyes swept over her, pausing at her soil-stained hem, and a faint, amused disdain touched his lips. It was the look a collector gives a piece of pottery that has developed an unexpected, vulgar crack. I heard you've taken up horticulture. The blight requires attention, May replied, refusing to bow her head. She remained standing, feeling like a wild transplant in the sterile room. A noble, if unconventional, endeavor for a gentlewoman, he said, sipping the tea Lady Lynn had poured with trembling hands. My father's new workshop manager tells me you've been inquiring about our water usage. Spreading theories. So, the Shin family was watching. Observation is not theory, May said. The river's composition has changed. It's harming the downstream ecology. Shin Jiao's smile didn't reach his eyes. The river serves progress, Xiao Mei. Indigo brings wealth to the province. A few flowers are a small price for prosperity. He set his cup down with a precise click. But let us speak of more important things. The Mid-Autumn Gala approaches. My mother is eager to see the Lin family's legendary blossom. The symbol of our union. The unspoken threat hung in the air, perfumed by sandalwood incense. Lady Lin's smile became a rictus. Of course. We are tending to it with the utmost care, young Master Shen. I'm glad to hear it. His gaze returned to May, cooler now. I would advise you to focus on the arts befitting your station. Poetry. Embroidery. Leave the dirt to the peasants. A wife who smells of the field is, he paused, searching for the right word, unseemly. Something in May, a blend of Melinda's pride and the old Xiaomei's buried spark of rebellion, ignited. She thought of Yingyue's terrified face in the courtyard. She thought of the dying plants, poisoned by this man's family's progress. She thought of a lifetime of being looked at with the same, condescending dismissal. Perhaps, May said, her voice suddenly clear and ringing, a wife who cannot understand the earth that feeds her, the water that sustains her, and the consequences of poisoning both, is not just unseemly, but unfit. The room froze. Lady Lin made a small, choked sound. Master Lin's head jerked up. Shin Jiao's polished composure cracked. A flush of angry red crept up his neck. You dare, I dare, May interrupted, the words pouring out now, hot and decisive. I dare to say that a marriage built on the corpse of my family's legacy and the suffering of a child is no union at all. I dare to say I will not be a small price for your prosperity. She took a step forward, her dirty work shoes silent on the fine carpet. The engagement, Shin Jiao, is off. You may keep your indigo prosperity. We will keep our dignity, whatever remains of it. The silence that followed was absolute, seismic. Shin Jiao stood up, his face pale with fury. You foolish, headstrong girl. You ruin yourself. You ruin your family. No one will have you after this. That, May said, feeling a terrifying, exhilarating freedom, is no longer your concern. She didn't wait for his response, for her mother's inevitable hysterics, for her father's collapse. She turned and walked out of the too-perfect room, leaving behind the scent of incense and betrayal. In the sun-dappled, blight-threatened garden, she found Yingyue carefully watering the fern tea onto the experimental plot. The girl looked up, worried by the commotion from the house. May knelt in the dirt beside her, the rich, real smell of earth filling her senses. She put a grimy hand on Yingyue's small, clean one. Don't worry, she said, her voice quiet now, but still strong. I made a mess in there. But out here, we're going to build something new. Starting with this. She pointed to a single, frail aureate blossom seedling in the treated plot. Overnight, a hint of gold had appeared in its veins, and the gray spot on its leaf had stopped spreading. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was a sign. A single, stubborn data point in a world of overwhelming superstition and greed. It was enough. For now, it was enough to keep digging. The fallout from the broken engagement was a slow, cold tide that seeped into every crack of the Lin household. Lady Lin took to her bed for 3 days, proclaiming a mortal illness brought on by her daughter's treason. Master Lin became a ghost, haunting his study, the weight of social annihilation bending his shoulders further. The servants moved through the halls in hushed whispers, casting sidelong glances at May that were equal parts awe and terror. She had not just rocked the boat, she had set it on fire in the middle of the harbor. May, however, had no time for the emotional weather inside. Her focus was the literal weather, and the soil. Her small test plot by the old well showed promise the graying had halted, a faint gold was returning to the leaf veins, but it was achingly slow. To scale her efforts, to save the main gardens, she needed materials. Not just lime, but specific things: serpentine rock dust rich in magnesium, wood ash for potassium, and most importantly, clean, cold mountain peat to rebuild the soil's microbiome. The local market had none. The Shin family controlled the river trade and the good quarries. There was only one place to get them: the misty peaks, the wild, forested spine of the province that loomed over fragrant river town. And there was only one person, according to the hushed, fearful gossip of the kitchen maids, who went up there and came back alive with anything of value. Kai. The name was spoken like a curse, or a prayer to avert evil. A former imperial guardsman, they said. Dismissed in disgrace for some unnamed, terrible failure. He lived now as a recluse on the lower slopes, a ghost who sometimes traded rare medicinal fungi or pristine pelts for salt and iron in the town's outskirts. He was said to be scarred, silent, and violently opposed to visitors. He was also May's only hope. 2 days after the Xinjiao debacle, with a light pack containing a wedge of precious tea brick and a small silver hairpin as potential trade goods, May set out. Inoue had begged to come, but May refused. This was no place for a child. She wore her sturdiest shoes and a plain, undyed hemp-over robe, drawing curious stares as she walked through the town's western gate, leaving the world of genteel decay for the raw, green breath of the wild. The path to Kai's rumored dwelling was not a path at all, but a suggestion made by deer and weathering. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of pine, damp moss, and something else: a quiet, thrumming energy that was absent in the polluted lowlands. It took her most of the morning, her city-softened muscles screaming in protest, before she saw a thin curl of smoke rising through the trees. His home wasn't a hovel, as she'd expected. It was a well-made, if severe, timber and stone lodge nestled in a small, breathtaking clearing. The clearing itself stopped May in her tracks. It was not wild, nor was it cultivated in any traditional sense. It was managed. Wild orchids grew in deliberate drifts beside stands of useful bracken. A pristine stream had been artfully diverted to form a series of shallow, gravel-lined pools. And there, in a sun-dappled corner, were rows of plants she recognized from her frantic research in the family's herbal compendium: ghost-cap mushrooms, notoriously finicky, growing in perfect symmetry on inoculated logs. Sky-reaching ginseng, its leaves a vibrant, healthy green, not the pale, struggling specimens sold in town. This was not the garden of a broken brute. This was the work of a master naturalist. Her awe was cut short by the low, warning growl. A massive, shaggy mountain dog, the color of storm clouds, materialized from the shadows of the porch, its amber eyes fixed on her. Before she could move, a figure stepped out from behind the lodge. Kai was taller than she'd imagined, and younger. The scars weren't the ravaged map of a brawler, but a single, clean, terrible line that descended from his temple, just missing his eye, down to his jaw: a blade stroke from someone who knew their business. His hair was tied back simply, and his clothes were faded but functional. His eyes, the color of the deep forest shade, held no warmth, only a flat, assessing caution. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, and his stillness was more intimidating than any shout. May swallowed, her rehearsed speeches evaporating. She bowed, a shallow, respectful dip of her head. "Master Kai. My name is Lin Mei. I apologize for intruding." He said nothing. The dog's growl subsided to a low rumble. I need your help," she pressed on, feeling foolish. "I need serpentine rock, from the high veins. And clean peat from the north-facing sphagnum bogs. I can trade." She held out the tea and the hairpin. His gaze flickered to her offerings, then back to her face. His voice, when it came, was rough from disuse, but quiet. "No." The flat refusal hung in the air. May felt a spike of desperation. "Please. It's for the aureate blossoms. The blight is killing them. I can fix it, but I need the right materials." The Shin family, at the mention of the Shins, a flicker of something dark passed behind his eyes. "Not my concern," he said, turning to go back inside. "You understand." The words burst from her, stopping him. She gestured wildly at his clearing, at the impeccable ginseng. "Look at this. You don't just forage. You cultivate. You understand symbiosis, microclimates, soil health. You know the old ways aren't just superstition, they're observation. The blight isn't a curse, it's poison from the indigo runoff. Acidic water. The plants are starving and sick." He had fully turned now, his guarded expression sharpened with something new, intense scrutiny. He took a step toward her, and the dog fell silent. How do you know this? Here it was. The precipice. She couldn't explain a PhD. I see it. In the leaves. In the soil. The same way you see that your ghost caps need the birch logs, not the oak, and a eastern exposure. She pointed to his mushroom logs. A long, silent moment stretched between them, filled only with the chatter of the stream and the wind in the pines. He was studying her as if she were a strange, new lichen on one of his trees. The Lins, he said finally, the name sounding strange in his mouth. You are the daughter. The one promised to Shinjiao. Not anymore. A faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement. And you think playing in the dirt will save your family? I know it will. But I need the right dirt. She met his gaze, refusing to look away from the severity of his. You have access to the clean sources. I have the knowledge of what's wrong. Together, we could. I work alone. The finality was back. The mountains are my refuge. I do not involve myself in gentry squabbles. The Shin poison is your problem. He nodded toward the path. Leave. Defeated, her shoulders slumped. She turned, the hope that had carried her up the mountain leaching away. As she took a few steps, her botanist's eye, ever active, caught something. At the edge of his pristine stream, where the water slowed into a pool, grew a patch of watercress. But interspersed with it were slender, gray-green reeds she knew from her world, Horsedale. A silica accumulator. A plant that thrived in acidic, mineral-saturated soil. It was a bioindicator. And it was growing here, in his perfect, managed ecosystem. She stopped, turning back. He was still watching her, a silent sentinel. Your stream, she said, her voice soft. It's already changing. The Horsedale. It's moving down from the higher slopes, isn't it? Following the acid. The Shin poison isn't just my problem, Master Kai. It's coming for you, too. It's coming for everything. For the first time, his impassive mask slipped completely. A flash of alarm, then grim understanding. He walked past her to the stream's edge, crouching down. His large, calloused fingers brushed the Horsedale, then dipped into the water. He brought his fingers to his nose, then his tongue a quick, tasting touch. He closed his eyes, a deep line of frustration etching between his brows. He stood, water dripping from his hand. The silence was different now, charged with a shared, looming threat. The high serpentine vein is a day's climb, he said, his voice still rough, but the refusal gone. The peat bogs are too, and guarded by black bears this time of year. He looked at her, a brutal assessment. You are soft. You will slow me down. I'm a fast learner. And I'm stubborn. Another of those long, evaluating looks. Then he gave a single, curt nod. Be here at first light tomorrow. Wear clothes you can ruin. Bring food for yourself. And tell no one where you are going. It wasn't enthusiasm. It wasn't partnership. It was a tactical alliance born of mutual threat. But it was a yes. May felt a surge of triumph so sharp it was almost painful. Thank you. Do not thank me, he said, turning back to his lodge. We are not friends. We are solving a problem. The dog's name is Nua. He does not like sudden movements. As May made her way back down the mountain, the weight of her family's disapproval felt lighter. The air, even tainted with the distant hint of something sour from the river, seemed fresher. She had an ally. A reluctant, terrifying, fascinatingly competent ally. And she had a plan. The real work began at first light. The world of the Lin estate fractured into two distinct realities. In one, life proceeded with a strained, funereal politeness. Lady Lin spoke to May only when necessary, her sentences clipped and cold. Master Lin drifted through the halls like a regret made flesh. The air in the main house was thick with the unsaid, ruin, scandal, hopelessness. In the other reality, centered on the walled garden and the old well plot, a quiet revolution was taking root. May and Kai's first expedition to the Misty Peaks had been a grueling, silent ordeal. He set a punishing pace, and true to his word, May's softness slowed them. But she didn't complain. She learned to read the trail in the way he did the bent fern here, the scuff on that moss-covered stone there. She gathered the horsedale she'd pointed out, stuffing it into her pack for later study. They found the serpentine vein, a slick, greenish rock face weeping cold mineral water. Kai efficiently chipped off chunks, his movements economical and powerful. At the peat bog, under the watchful, distant gaze of a bear, they dug in silence, filling sacks with the dark, fibrous, sweet-smelling earth. The return journey, under a sliver of a moon, was spent in utter exhaustion, but May carried a fierce, secret joy. She had the ingredients. Now, days later, the test plot was transforming. The application of crushed serpentine, for magnesium, wood ash, from their own hearths, sifted fine, and the acidic peat to buffer the soil had worked in concert with her lime and fern tea. The sickly gray blossoms weren't just holding on, they were pushing out new growth. The leaves deepened to a healthier emerald, the gold veins within them glowing like captured sunlight. Their fragrance, once sickly, now carried a crisp, honeyed note on the morning air. It was a scientific triumph. But in Fragrant River Town, science was indistinguishable from witchcraft. Gossip, which had simmered after the broken engagement, now reached a full boil. It flowed from the Lynn's own gardeners, who watched their young mistress's mad methods yield shocking results with superstitious dread. She bargained with the mountain spirit, the head gardener muttered to the stable hand, within earshot of a visiting merchant. Traded who knows what for cursed rocks. Those blossoms smell of devilry. I heard the outcast, Kai, does her bidding now, the stable hand whispered back. They say he brings her potions made from bat wings and moonlight. The merchant carried these tales to the tea house, where they grew more elaborate with each retelling. May heard the whispers like a distant hum. She was too busy. She had started a composting system in a hidden corner, layering kitchen scraps, manure, and the mineral-rich weeds she foraged. Inoue was her constant shadow, her small hands learning to turn the pile with a serious focus. The gardener's boy, Fu, had become a convert, his cloud-gazing replaced by a rapt attention to May's every instruction. He was her first, clumsy scribe, using a charcoal stick to make crude marks on bark paper to record which plants received which treatments. The change in the main garden was slower, more stubborn, but even there, the relentless gray advance had stalled. This progress did not go unnoticed by the house upstream. Xin Jiao's humiliation had curdled into a cold, calculating fury. His father, old Master Shen, was less emotional and more pragmatic. The Lin girl's success, however achieved, was a problem. If she truly cured the blight and produced a viable blossom, it would not only vindicate her outrageous behavior but also implicitly prove her accusations about the indigo runoff. Their workshop's profitability was balanced on a knife's edge of reputation, an ecological scandal could tip it. The gala approaches, old Master Shen said, swirling a cup of expensive wine in his study overlooking the river. Our gift to the governor must be unparalleled. I will not have it overshadowed by rehabilitated weeds from a disgraced house. Xin Jiao's lips thinned. The vulgar methods are an affront. But the town whispers are not enough. They are intrigued, not repulsed. Then give them a reason to be repulsed, the old man said, his eyes like chips of flint. A blight can return. A promising garden can fail. Tragically. In the night. A cruel smile touched Xin Jiao's mouth. He understood. He would not dirty his own hands, of course. But silver could buy many hands. That night, the moon was shrouded by fast-moving clouds. Two shadows, hired muscle from the docklands, slipped over the Lin family's rear garden wall. They carried sacking and small clay pots. Their instructions were simple: rip up the strange, recovering plants in the main plot and pour a concoction of vinegar and cheap lamp oil into the soil of the test plot, salting the earth. They moved with practiced stealth, reaching the heart of the garden. The aureate blossoms loomed like pale ghosts in the darkness. One man raised a crude ho sssssssthwap. A sound like an angry serpent, followed by a wet slap. The man with the hoe yelped, stumbling back. Something cold, slimy, and incredibly foul-smelling had hit him square in the chest. He gagged, the stench of rotted eggs and swamp gas assaulting his senses. His partner spun around, just in time for a second projectile to catch him in the face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes, which watered uncontrollably. From the deeper shadows by the old well, a figure emerged. Not May, but Kai. He held a strange, supple branch, a makeshift sapling slingshot. At his feet sat a small basket of what looked like overripe, pulpy gourds. The next ones are filled with ghost pepper oil, Kai said, his voice a low rumble that carried terrifying clarity in the silent night. It blinds for a week. Leave. Now. The would-be saboteurs, half-blinded, choking on stench, needed no further persuasion. They dropped their tools and pots and scrambled back over the wall, their retreat accompanied by the sound of retching. May stepped out from behind a large peony bush, a hand over her own nose. Ugh. Your stinkspore pod delivery system is effective. I could smell it from back here. Kai nudged one of the shattered gourds with his foot. The offending odor wafted stronger. Musk cabbage and bog orchid paste. Rotted for a month. The smell lingers for days. He almost sounded satisfied. You anticipated this, May said, admiration cutting through her disgust. She had been woken by Nua's low growl and had found Kai already preparing his malodorous ammunition. The shins are predictable. Arrogance makes them clumsy. He looked at the dropped clay pots. He uncorked one, sniffed, and his expression darkened further. Vinegar and oil. They weren't just ruining the plants. They were making the soil barren for seasons. A petty, thorough spite. A new kind of anger, cold and sharp, settled in May's stomach. This wasn't just business competition. This was wanton destruction. We need to protect the garden. Properly, she said. Kai nodded. Thorns. I know a vine. It screams when cut. And a powder of itching moss for the walls. As they began to discuss botanical security systems, a small, frantic whisper cut through the dark. Aunt May. Aunt May. Inoue emerged from the houseside path, her face pale in the gloom, clutching a shawl around her nightclothes. She was trembling, but not from the cold. I couldn't sleep. I heard noises and came to the kitchen window. I saw him. Her words tumbled out in a rush. Saw who, little one? May asked, kneeling. The bad man. The one who tried to take me. The pawnbroker man. He was in the alley behind the tea house. He was talking to a man in a very fine dark robe, with a jade ring. They were loading boxes into a cart. Not the same cart as before. A nicer one. With a symbol. She scrunched her face, trying to remember. A bird. A silver heron. May and Kai exchanged a glance. A silver heron was the trade emblem of the Jade River Consortium, a luxury goods guild based in the provincial capital. They dealt in silks, spices, jewels, and, it was rumored, exceedingly rare and legally dubious spiritual botanicals. The pieces clicked into place with an ugly finality. The trafficker, Madame Feng's artisan troupe, wasn't just selling children into servitude. It was a front. They were scouting for unique, local botanical knowledge and sources. The children were a side business, or perhaps a means to pressure vulnerable families. The real prize was control over things like the aureate blossom. And the Shin family, with their upstream poison and their social leverage, were either unwitting tools in this, or active participants. The night's cool air suddenly felt menacing. The garden was no longer just a project, it was a battleground. The blight was a symptom, but the disease was a network of greed that reached from the dye vats of the Shin family to the elegant carts of the capital's luxury guild. May looked at her recovering blossoms, then at Inua's terrified face, and finally at Kai's grim, ready expression. All right, she breathed, her voice steady. Thorns that scream. Moss that itches. And we start keeping a ledger of our own. Not just of soil amendments. She met Kai's eyes. Of enemies. The quiet revolution in the garden had just gotten loud. And it was prepared to fight back. Progress, May was learning, was a fickle and often ugly thing. It didn't arrive in a glorious burst of perfumed petals. It came in the stubborn green nub of a new leaf fighting through scarred bark. It came in the dense, crumbly texture of the compost pile after a month of careful turning. It was measured not in fanfare, but in the absence of gray lesions. The main garden of the Lin estate was no longer a place of visible decay. The blight's advance had been decisively halted. Under May's regimented care, the precise applications of mineral dusts, the protective guilds of ferns and fragrant herbs planted as living mulch, the channels dug to divert and filter runoff the aureate blossoms had rallied. Their leaves were broad and vigorous, their stems stout. They were healthy. But they were not magnificent. As the sweltering height of summer began to waver, giving the first hints of the autumn to come, the buds formed. They were plentiful, promising a good yield. But when May cupped one in her hand, it felt ordinary. Its potential fragrance was pleasant, a generic floral sweetness. It lacked the haunting, layered complexity notes of apricot, incense, and dawn mist that defined a truly superior blossom. It certainly wasn't the transcendent imperial grade needed to stun the gala and reverse their fortunes. The soil is balanced. The pathogens are suppressed. They have everything they need to survive, May muttered to Kai one afternoon, frustration etching a line between her brows. They stood in the dappled shade of a willow, away from the curious eyes of Fu and Inue, who were busy applying a nettle tea to deter aphids. But to thrive, to become something exceptional. It's not enough. I'm missing a variable. Kai leaned against the willow, his arms crossed. He had become a near constant, silent presence at the garden's periphery since the sabotage attempt. His dog, Nua, lay at his feet, a shaggy, watchful rug. You've given them the body, he said, his voice low. But not the spirit. May looked at him sharply. That sounded suspiciously like the superstitious talk she dismissed. Explain. He pushed off from the tree and walked to the edge of the plot, pointing not at the blossoms, but at a quiet, neglected corner where wildflowers grew. May followed, curious. He knelt, and with a surprisingly gentle touch, brushed aside some leaves to reveal a small, dusty-looking moth cocoon attached to a stem. It was a dull, unremarkable thing. The Yuiguan hudi, he said. The moonlight moth. It emerges only under the full moon, for one night. Its proboscis is the exact length and shape to pollinate the deepest nectar spur of a mature aureate blossom. He looked up at her, his forest dark eyes serious. The pollination is not just about seed. It is a transfer. The moth carries stories from other blossoms, from other soils, from the moonlight itself. It triggers the final synthesis of the oils that create the legendary fragrance. No moth, no soul. May's scientific mind rebelled at the poetry of it, but the ecologist in her sang. Pollinator specificity. A keystone species. It made perfect, beautiful sense. The peak fragrance was an evolutionary lure for a specific partner. Without that partner, you got a generic, vacant version. The moths are gone, she said, the realization dawning with cold clarity. She remembered the silent nights in the garden, devoid of the flutter of anything but common cabbage whites. The sulfurous stink from the dye works, the acid in the air and water. It would disrupt their pheromones, poison their larvae host plants. Kai gave a single, grim nod. I haven't seen one in 2 seasons. They've retreated. Probably to the high valleys of the misty peaks, where the air is still clean. Hope, sharp and desperate, pierced May's frustration. Then that's where we go. We find them. We collect cocoons, or attract them back. It's not that simple, Kai said, rising to his full height. The journey is difficult. The peaks are not just steep, they are disagreeable. The valleys are protected by old magic and older storms. And the moths are fragile. Moving them is a delicate art. He studied her, the softness of her hands, the determined set of her jaw. It is a risk. You could lose everything for a chance at more. Before May could answer, the first heavy drop of rain splattered on the stone path between them. Then another. The sky, which had been a benign, hazy blue, had turned the color of a bruise in the west with shocking speed. A low growl of thunder echoed down from the very mountains they were discussing. A summer storm, Kai said, his gaze shifting to the roiling clouds. But an angry one. The wind picked up, a sudden, hot gust that whipped the willow branches into a frenzy and tore at the blossoms. The healthy, proud stems began to sway dangerously. May's heart seized. All her work, the balanced soil, the recovered plants, was about to be pummeled into the mud. The stakes. We need to support them. Fu. Inue. Get the bamboo poles from the shed. She sprinted into the garden, the rain beginning to fall in earnest, cold and hard. Kai was right behind her, moving with lethal efficiency. Fu and Inue scrambled, wide-eyed, as the wind howled. Chaos descended. The rain wasn't a shower, it was a torrential downpour, turning paths into streams and flower beds into quagmires. The beautifully dug drainage channels were instantly overwhelmed. May struggled with a bamboo pole, trying to wedge it next to a prized plant, but the wind snatched it from her hands, sending it clattering away. She fell to her knees in the mud, grasping at the base of a shuddering blossom, trying to hold it upright with her bare hands. She was losing. The storm was undoing months of careful labor in minutes. Then, a shadow fell over her. Not Kai. Lin Tao, her elder brother, his fine robes already soaked and splattered, thrust a heavy wooden stake into the ground beside her. He didn't look at her, his face set in a grim mask. "Hold it," he barked, and began lashing the plant to the stake with rough twine. A moment later, Lin Wei, the younger brother, was there, digging a frantic trench with a shovel to divert a new rivulet threatening to swamp an entire row. He slipped in the mud, cursed colorfully, and got back up, digging with a furious energy May had never seen in him. From the house, Lady Lin appeared, of all people. Not in silks, but in an old work dress, a wide-brimmed rain hat plastered to her head. She carried an armload of torn sheeting. Without a word, she began draping the fabric over the most exposed buds, her movements sharp with practical fury. Master Lin did not come into the mud. But he stood in the covered walkway, holding a lantern high against the premature darkness, a silent, steady beacon in the chaos. They didn't speak. There were no apologies, no sudden declarations of faith. There was only the shared, desperate battle against the storm. Tao's strong hands driving stakes. Wei's muddy determination. Their mother's fierce, protective gestures. May directed them between gasps, her voice hoarse from shouting over the wind. "That row. The water is pooling there. Prop that one, it's leaning." Kai worked like a force of nature himself, moving from crisis to crisis, his solutions brute force effective, rerouting a waterfall off the roof with a flung plank, building a makeshift barrier with a garden bench. For an hour, they fought. The storm raged, tearing leaves, bruising petals, but it did not break the garden's spine. When the rain finally slowed to a drizzle and the wind died to a sigh, they stood in the wreckage, panting, soaked to the skin, and caked in mud from head to toe. The garden was a mess. But it was standing. Every blossom that had been staked and sheltered was intact. The floodwaters were receding through the channels they'd cleared. May looked at her family. Tao wiped mud from his cheek, looking at the saved plants with something like astonishment. Wei leaned on his shovel, exhausted but grinning triumphantly at a particularly well-braced specimen. Lady Lin straightened her sodden hat, her gaze sweeping over the garden, then landing on May. There was no smile, but the icy hostility was gone, replaced by a stark, weary assessment. "You made a strong foundation," Tao said finally, his voice rough. "The roots held. Old Master Deng's plants would have washed away like straw in that." It wasn't praise. It was an observation of fact. But from her brother, it was a revolution. May felt a lump in her throat that had nothing to do with the storm. They had come. When it mattered, they had gotten dirty with her. "We lost some buds," she said, her own voice unsteady. "But the plants are alive. The soil. The soil held." Master Lin's lantern still glowed from the walkway. He gave a single, slow nod, then turned and went inside. Lady Lin approached May. She reached out, not to strike or embrace, but to pluck a torn, muddy leaf from May's hair. "You look like a gutter urchin," she said, but the old vitriol was absent. It was almost fond. "Go clean up before you catch a fever. The plants will wait." As her family trudged back towards the house, leaving her alone with Kai in the dripping, storm-battered garden, the magnitude of what just happened settled over her. She had her missing variable, the moonlight moth. And she had, for the first time, something perhaps just as vital, not her family's belief, but their reluctant, mud-spattered solidarity. She looked at Kai, who was carefully inspecting a moth cocoon that had survived the deluge. "The high valleys," she said, rainwater tracing paths through the grime on her face. "We leave as soon as the paths are dry." He met her gaze and nodded. The risk was immense. But after tonight, turning back felt impossible. The world above the tree line was a different kind of silence. Not the gentle hush of the forest, but a vast, wind-scoured quiet that seemed to swallow sound whole. The air was thin, cold, and carried the clean, flinty scent of stone and sky. May's lungs burned with every step, her legs trembling from 2 days of relentless ascent. The comfortable world of fragrant river town, with its petty gossip and social ruin, felt like a distant, feverish dream. Kai moved ahead of her with the sure-footed grace of the mountain itself, his pack seeming like part of his body. New arranged even further ahead, a gray ghost disappearing and reappearing between rock outcroppings. They had spoken little since leaving the Lin estate before dawn. The shared purpose was communication enough. "This valley," May gasped during a brief rest, her hands on her knees. "How do you know the moths are here?" Kai pointed to a scatter of delicate, star-like white flowers clinging to a crevice. By Xingxiao, he said. The moth's sole host plant for its larvae. They only grow above the poison line. He glanced at the haze obscuring the lowlands. The line has been moving higher each year. The final climb was a narrow, treacherous goat track along a cliff face. May pressed herself against cold stone, refusing to look down into the dizzying drop. Kai's hand, steady and impersonal, closed around her wrist at one particularly exposed section, guiding her across. His touch was calloused and warm, gone as soon as she was safe. Then, they crested the ridge, and the world opened up. The hidden valley was a bowl of emerald held in the mountain's stony palms. A crystal-clear stream, born from a laughing waterfall, wound through meadows thick with Xingxiao. The air hummed, not just with insects, but with a palpable, sweet energy. And everywhere dancing in shafts of sunlight, clinging to the starry flowers, resting on smooth river stones were the moonlight moths. They were larger than May expected, their wings the color of a dusk sky dusted with iridescent silver powder. As one fluttered past her face, she saw the delicate, curled proboscis Kai had described. Their movement was not frantic, but a slow, graceful ballet. The scent in the air was indescribable, like the memory of the perfect aureate blossom fragrance, mixed with cold water and ozone. It's a refuge, May whispered, her scientific awe morphing into reverence. This was a pristine ecosystem, a last redoubt. Kai nodded, already scanning. We look for cocoons. Mature ones, ready to emerge. We take only a few. The balance here is fragile. They worked carefully, Nua standing watch. May's trained eye quickly learned to spot the cocoon's small, silvery gray ovals artfully disguised as lichen on rocks or tucked in the grass tufts. She used a soft brush from her pack to gently transfer each precious find into a padded, ventilated box lined with fresh host plant leaves. As she worked near the stream, something else caught her eye. A pattern in the earth. Not a natural one. She brushed aside a thicket of ferns. And froze. Neat, cultivated rows. Tidy irrigation channels dug with tool precision. Stakes supporting vigorous, familiar plants. Aureate blossoms. But not just any blossoms. These were breathtaking. Their leaves were a deeper, richer green than any she'd seen, the gold veins pulsing with visible vitality. The buds, fat and heavy, already emitted a faint, dizzying perfume that made the air taste like honey and lightning. They were a genetic cut above even the Lin family's original stock. And they were planted here, in this secret sanctuary, in blatant, organized rows. This isn't a refuge, May breathed, horror dawning. It's a farm. A theft. Kai was at her side in an instant. He took in the scene, his face hardening into something dangerous. He knelt, examining the soil at the base of a plant, then a stake. He pointed to a small, branded mark on the wood, a tiny, intricate silver heron. The Jade River Consortium. The luxury guild from the capital. The trafficker's contact. The pieces crashed together with devastating clarity. The consortium wasn't just buying stolen blossoms on the black market. They were engineering them. They'd identified the key ecological components, the clean valley, the host plants, the moss, and seized them. They were cultivating a monopoly on true imperial-grade blossoms, using the Shen family's downstream poisoning to cripple their competitors and drive up the value of their own pristine product. The trafficking, the sabotage, it was all part of clearing the field, literally and figuratively. The moths here aren't wild, Kai said, his voice a low growl. They're managed. See? He pointed to sheltered bamboo frames holding strips of bark smeared with a sticky, fragrant paste. They're baiting them, concentrating them for maximum pollination of these stolen cultivars. A sickening feeling twisted in May's gut. Her family's legacy wasn't just failing, it was being systematically plundered and replaced. The artisan troupe scouting for vulnerable girls was likely also scouting for rare botanical knowledge and locations. Inoue had been a target of the same machine that was now stealing the very soul of their blossoms. We have to go, Kai said suddenly, his head snapping up. Nua emitted a low, warning whine. From further down the valley, voices echoed. Rough, professional voices, not the chatter of pilgrims or foragers. Check the western traps. The boss wants a count before the full moon emergence. May shoved the box of cocoons into her pack. Kai took her arm, pulling her back into the cover of the boulders and ferns. They moved with desperate silence, abandoning the path for a steep, scree-covered slope. The descent was a controlled fall. Rocks skittered away from their feet, clattering down with alarming noise. Shouts rose behind them. "They're here! Poachers! Stop them!" An arrow whizzed past, embedding itself in a pine trunk with a sickening thwack. These weren't just gardeners, they were guards. Kai pushed May ahead of him, turning to face the pursuit. He didn't draw a weapon, but scooped up a handful of loose scree. With a powerful, underhand throw, he sent a cloud of sharp fragments into the face of the lead guard, who cried out and stumbled. Another guard raised a crossbow. Nua, a blur of grey fury, launched himself at the man's arm, sending the bolt skyward. "Run, May! Follow the water down!" Kai yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. May ran. The world became a jarring, breathless rush of tree trunks and sloping ground. She could hear the sounds of struggle behind her, a shout cut short, a heavy thud, Nua's fierce barking. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not just from exertion but from a primal fear. The pristine beauty of the valley was a lie, it was a gilded cage, a corporate stronghold defended by arrows. She found the stream and scrambled alongside it, slipping on wet stones, her hands torn by brambles. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds of pursuit faded. She collapsed behind a massive, mossy fallen log, her breath sobbing in her throat, clutching the pack containing the cocoons to her chest like a child. She waited in the dripping silence, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Had Kai been caught? Was he hurt? Then, a familiar, silent shadow emerged from the trees. Kai. A fresh, shallow cut bled along his jawline, and his clothes were torn, but he moved with the same lethal calm. Nua padded beside him, muzzle dark but unharmed. Guards. Not soldiers. Slow in the trees, Kai reported, his breathing only slightly elevated. He looked at the pack in her arms. The moths? Safe, she managed. He nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Then we won. They have their stolen garden. We have the key. He offered her a hand up. It was steadier than hers. We keep moving. They will send trackers. As they began the long, cautious descent back towards the world of men, the triumph of the cocoons in her pack was bittersweet. She had what she needed to save her family's garden. But she had also seen the true face of the enemy. It wasn't just Xinjiao's petty spite. It was a hydra-headed beast of commerce, willing to poison rivers, steal children, and privatize moonlight to control beauty itself. The gala was no longer just about social redemption. It was shaping up to be a war. And she now held, in a padded box, some of its most essential ammunition. The Mid-Autumn Gala was not a mere party, it was the social seismograph of the province. Held in the governor's sprawling lakeside pavilion, it measured status, influence, and favor with cruel precision. Lanterns shaped like full moons and celestial carp cast a soft, golden glow over the assembled gentry. The air shimmered with the scent of expensive perfumes, roasted meats, and the underlying, sharp aroma of ambition. The Lin family's arrival was a study in subdued defiance. Lady Lin wore her second-best set of robes, her chin held high, a fixed smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Master Lin looked older, but there was a new, quiet solidity to him. Tao and Wei flanked their parents, their expressions carefully neutral. They were a family braced for impact. And then there was May. She had foregone elaborate silks for a gown of deep, moss green, subtly embroidered with silver threads and patterns that echoed fern fronds and root structures. It was elegant, but undeniably strange. In her arms, she carried a simple, polished lacquer box. Her hair was styled simply, held by a single pin carved from serpentine rock Kai had given her. She looked less like a marriageable daughter and more like an ambassador from a foreign, greener kingdom. Whispers trailed them like ghosts as they were announced. The Lins. She's the one who broke with Xinjiao. I hear she talks to dirt. They say their garden is cursed. They were given a seat far from the governor's dais, a clear demotion. May ignored it, her senses acutely tuned to the environment. She noted the arrangements of potted plants, stressed from overwatering, the quality of the incense, too cloying, masking inferior ingredients, and the faces of the powerful. Governor Zhang sat on the dais, a man with intelligent eyes and a weary patience about him. Beside him was his severe, sharp-eyed wife. Then, the fanfare. The Shen family's entrance was a calculated performance. Old Master Shen led, radiating complacent prosperity. Xin Jiao followed, resplendent in robes the color of the midnight sky, embroidered with silver cranes. He carried himself like a prince, a slight, condescending smile on his lips. And in the hands of a serving girl walking reverently behind him was their offering. It was displayed on a pillow of midnight velvet. The aureate blossom. A collective gasp rippled through the pavilion. It was enormous, its petals unfurled in perfect, radial symmetry. They glowed with a deep, rich gold, as if infused with liquid sunlight. The fragrance that wafted from it was powerful, intoxicating, a heavy, sweet perfume that instantly dominated the space. It was spectacular. It was too spectacular. May's botanist heart sank for a second, then hardened into certainty. She knew that blossom. Not personally, but categorically. It had the overblown, forced perfection of the stolen cultivars from the hidden valley. The scent was loud, but one-dimensional, lacking the ethereal top notes that came from moth pollination and complex soil life. It was a trophy, not a testament. Xin Jiao presented it to the governor with a deep bow. Your Excellency, a humble offering from the House of Xin. An aureate blossom of imperial grade, cultivated with reverence and innovation, a symbol of the prosperity and harmony we cherish. Governor Zhang leaned forward, his expression appreciative. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. In a season of such hardship for many, this is a sight to behold. His gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on the Lin family, and the unspoken comparison hung in the air. See what competence looks like? Old Master Shen preened. This was their moment of absolute victory. The Lin girl's defiance, her mud digging, all of it would be erased by the undeniable supremacy of this flower. May waited. She let the admiration peak. She let Xin Jiao's smirk reach its fullest, most insufferable width. Then, she stood up. The movement was quiet, but in the context of the focused ceremony, it was as shocking as a thunderclap. Every eye swung to her. Lady Lin made a tiny, choked sound. Xin Jiao's smirk froze. Your Excellency, May's voice rang out, clear and calm, carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent pavilion. Forgive my interruption. May I offer a compliment to the House of Shen? Governor Zhang, intrigued, nodded. Speak, young lady. May stepped forward, leaving her box on the table. She approached the dais, her eyes on the glorious, fraudulent blossom. The visual presentation is masterful. A triumph of forcing. She let the word hang. However, true imperial grade is judged not just by the eye, but by essence and longevity. I fear this blossom carries a hidden flaw. A sickness. Uproar. Outraged murmurs from the Shen faction. Puzzled whispers from others. Slander. Xin Jiao spat, his composure shattering. You jealous, vindictive creature. Your own garden produces nothing but weeds and failure, and you dare to insult our achievement? May ignored him, speaking directly to the governor. The highest grade of aureate blossom derives its unique, enduring fragrance from a delicate balance of oils within the petal cells. When the plant is forced with chemical supplements and grown in sterile, stolen soil, that balance is artificial. It is unstable. One can detect it with a simple test of character. She turned to a serving maid standing nearby with a jug of water and an empty cup for the governor. May I? Bewildered, the girl nodded. May took the empty cup. From a small pouch at her belt, she pinched out a powder she had prepared the day before, a mix of finely crushed purple cabbage leaf and powdered limestone. To the crowd, it looked like mysterious gray dust. She placed a single, radiant gold petal, plucked with a gentle touch from the Shen blossom, into the cup. Then she added a splash of water from the jug. Observe, she said. She stirred gently with a chopstick. For a moment, nothing. Then, the water in contact with the petal began to change. It shifted from clear to a distinct, sickly greenish yellow. A murmur of confusion ran through the crowd. Pure water is neutral, May explained, her voice a lecturing tone she'd used in 100 university labs. The sap of a truly healthy, naturally balanced aureate blossom is slightly alkaline. It would turn this indicator a pale blue or violet. She gestured to the cup. This green-yellow indicates pronounced acidity. The sign of a plant grown in stressed, chemically fed conditions. The same acidity, she added, her gaze locking with Xin Jiao's, that one finds in soil poisoned by indigo runoff and hastily corrected with raw lime. This blossom is a beautiful fraud. It will wilt within days, its perfume turning sour. It is not a gift of harmony, but of deception. The silence was absolute. You could hear the lanterns flicker. Xin Jiao's face was a mask of purple rage. This is peasant trickery. Foolish superstition. You expect us to believe your witch's potion over the evidence of our own eyes? Governor Zhang held up a hand. His eyes were sharp, now fully engaged. He looked from the vibrant, possibly poisonous blossom to May's calm, assured face. A compelling demonstration, Miss Lin. But accusations require proof of a positive nature. Can you show us what true essence looks like? This was the moment. May glanced toward the pavilion's entrance, where Kai stood in the shadows, unseen by the glittering crowd. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. May turned back to the governor. The House of Lin also wishes to present an offering. She walked back to her table and opened the lacquer box. From it, she lifted a single aureate blossom. It was smaller than the Shin's behemoth. Its color was a softer, luminescent gold, like the first touch of dawn. It did not shout, it hummed. And as she lifted it, its fragrance unfurled not a wall of perfume, but a delicate, complex melody that wove through the air. Notes of apricot and honey, yes, but underneath, a clean, mineral sharpness like mountain air, a whisper of incense, and a haunting, elusive top note that was pure, captured moonlight. It didn't overpower the senses, it conversed with them. The crowd leaned in, inhaling as one. The difference was not just noticeable, it was profound. One was a shout in a gilded room, the other was a poem whispered in a sacred grove. May placed the blossom before the governor. Cultivated not with force, but with balance. Healed soil, clean water, and the essential partnership of a creature driven to the edge of extinction by poison. She did not look at the Shins. She didn't need to. Governor Zhang closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. When he opened them, they shone with genuine wonder. This is the fragrance from my childhood. The true scent of Xingui. He looked at May with new respect. You grew this? Before May could answer, a figure stepped from the shadows. Kai, in his simple, sturdy clothes, a stark contrast to the silks and jewels. He bowed to the governor, not the deep bow of a servant, but the respectful nod of an equal. Under the guidance of Lin May's methods, Your Excellency. She diagnosed the poison, designed the cure, and understood the missing key. I merely provided access to what the mountains had guarded. The revelation was explosive. The mysterious, disgraced guardsman, vouching for the disgraced daughter. The story wrote itself: redemption, partnership, truth versus fraud. Old Master Shen looked as if he'd swallowed a live eel. Xin Jiao was trembling, his glorious victory turned to ashes in his mouth, exposed before the entire power structure of the province. Governor Zhang's gaze swept from the magnificent, fraudulent blossom to the modest, radiantly real one. His expression settled into one of cold displeasure. It appears one offering speaks of harmony with nature, and the other speaks only of harmony with deceit. He gestured to a servant. Remove the Shin family's gift. I find its fragrance suddenly offensive. It was the most devastating snub imaginable. The Shin family's social capital evaporated in that instant. As their perfect, acidic blossom was carried away, the Lin family's humble, fragrant one remained on the dais, its quiet perfume beginning to cleanse the air. May didn't smile in triumph. She felt a deep, weary relief. The first battle was won. But as she caught Xin Jiao's eyes, blazing with a hatred now stripped of all pretense, she knew the war was far from over. The consortium, the stolen valley, they were still out there. But tonight, she had proven one vital thing: the truth, armed with a little chemistry and a lot of nerve, could topple even the most gilded lie. The morning after the gala dawned clear and brittle, the air scrubbed clean by the night's tensions. In the Lin household, the atmosphere was one of dazed, disbelieving triumph. Lady Lin moved with a lightness she hadn't possessed in years, ordering the servants about with a voice that had lost its shrill edge. Master Lin sat in the main hall, sipping his tea and actually looking at the garden through the open doors, a contemplative, almost peaceful expression on his face. Tao and Wei talked in hushed, excited tones about the governor's obvious favor. May, however, felt a restless unease. Winning a social battle was not the same as winning the war. The Shin family was humiliated, but they were rich, entrenched, and now, truly dangerous. The Jade River Consortium's operation in the mountains remained intact. And her single, perfect blossom, the product of a rescued moth's one, precious pollination, was just that, a single blossom. It had proven a point, but it wasn't a sustainable victory. She was in the garden, examining the cocoons they'd rescued. They were safe in a specially built, shaded enclosure, the Baixing Tsao fresh and moist. Soon, under the next full moon, they would emerge. But it was a pitifully small number to repopulate a valley and secure a harvest. They will come today, Kai said. He stood by the garden wall, his gaze on the lane leading to their estate. Nua lay at his feet, ears pricked. The Shins? May asked, a knot tightening in her stomach. No. The governor. Or his men. Public vindication is one thing. Real interest is another. Kai was right. Before the noon meal, a procession arrived. Not the governor's full retinue, but a sleek, official carriage accompanied by 4 sharp-eyed guards and a scholarly-looking man in the robes of a senior clerk. It was Advisor Li, Governor Zhang's right hand. The Lin family received him with nervous formality. Advisor Li was polite but direct, his eyes missing nothing. He complimented the restored vitality of the estate, a subtle acknowledgement that he'd done his homework. Then he came to the point. His Excellency was deeply impressed by your demonstration, Miss Lin. And by the quality of your blossom. It evoked a memory of the province's true heritage. He steepled his fingers. He is faced with a crisis. The aureate blossom is more than a perfume. It is a key component in the 7 harmonious balms used by the imperial physicians. The supply has been dwindling, the quality inconsistent. The imperial court is displeased. What was presented last night, he paused delicately, the other blossom, exemplifies the problem, beautiful corruption. May's heart began to beat faster. This was bigger than social standing. His Excellency wishes to know, Advisor Li continued, his gaze fixed on May, if the methods that produced your single blossom can be scaled. Can you secure a reliable, pure supply? Not in a generation, but in seasons? It was the question she'd been asking herself. She thought of the stolen valley, the consortium's efficient, immoral operation. She thought of her small cocoons, her struggling but recovering fields. She could lie, buy time. Or she could tell the devastating truth. She chose truth. The methods can be scaled, Advisor Li, she said, her voice steady. But the obstacles are not just agricultural. They are human. She told him. Not as gossip, but as a report. The indigo runoff. The attempted sabotage. The journey to the mountains. And what they found, the hidden valley, the cultivated rows of superior blossoms, the silver heron brand, the armed guards. As she spoke, Advisor Li's polite mask dissolved into one of intense, grave focus. Master Lin paled. Lady Lin's hand fluttered to her throat. You are alleging, Advisor Li said slowly, that the Jade River Consortium is not only smuggling but actively cultivating stolen intellectual property on a protected mountain scale, using force, and that the Shin family's pollution is either a coincidental boon to them or a deliberate strategy. I am stating observable facts, May replied. The consortium controls the source. They let the lowland gardens sicken to inflate the value of their own stock. My single blossom was grown from a rescued lineage, against their monopoly. Advisor Li was silent for a long moment. This is a serious accusation. It implicates a major guild with connections in the capital. Do you have proof beyond your testimony? May's spirit sank. The cocoons were proof of location, not theft. The memory of the brand was just that, a memory. Kai had spoken, he was a disgraced guardsman. She was a girl with a reputation for eccentricity. Then, Kai spoke from the doorway where he leaned, unnoticed until now. The proof is not here. It is in the valley. But to retrieve it, you would need to confront consortium guards on a remote mountain. A difficult, deniable operation for the governor's office. Advisor Li assessed Kai, recognizing the tone of a man who understood power and its limitations. Indeed. Without undeniable proof, His Excellency's hands are tied against an entity like the consortium. He needs a solution, not a scandal. The room seemed to darken with the weight of impossible politics. They had won the moment, but the system was about to crush them. Then, a new voice, quiet and firm, cut through the despair. Perhaps there is another form of proof. Everyone turned. Inua stood there, having slipped into the room unseen. She was holding a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Her face was pale but set with determination. She walked to Advisor Li and placed the bundle in his hands. the man with the pawnbroker's eyes. He dropped this when Aunt May scared him away that first day. I kept it. I thought it might be bad luck, but I hid it anyway. Advisor Lee unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with cramped, meticulous characters and numbers. He flipped through it, his eyes scanning faster and faster. Lists of names. Dates. Payments. Shipments. And next to many entries, a small, inked seal, a silver heron. It was a record. Not of blossoms, but of girls. Names, ages, villages, prices paid to intermediaries like Madame Fong, and final destinations often to associated households of the Jade River Consortium in the capital. It was a smoking gun, linking the trafficking operation directly to the guild. But on the final pages, the entries changed. They listed botanical goods, Oriot stock, Misty Peak variant, 10 cuttings. Payment to Mountain Guard Foresight Security. Bribe to local magistrate, Fragrant River Precinct, for non-interference. The last entry, dated just a week ago, read, Contingency order, if Lynn Garden shows recovery, acquire head gardener or female principal by any means. Knowledge must be contained or absorbed. The room was ice cold. May felt the blood drain from her face. Female principal. Her. They had planned to kidnap her or Fu. Advisor Lee closed the ledger with a snap that sounded like a judge's gavel. His face was grim. This, he said, his voice low and charged, is undeniable proof. He looked at Inoue with profound respect. You have shown great courage, child. He turned to May. His Excellency now has his scandal, and his solution. The scandal belongs to the consortium and their local allies. The solution, he gestured to the garden outside, belongs to you. Can you do it? With the governor's full authority behind you, with the consortium's operation here dismantled, can you restore the province's blossoms? May looked out at her garden. She thought of the poisoned river, the stolen valley, the tiny, brave moths in their enclosure. She thought not in terms of single blossoms, but of ecosystems, of partnerships, of truth versus exploitation. Yes, she said, and for the first time, the word held no doubt, only certainty. Not by creating another monopoly. But by teaching the method. By cleaning the river. By making the knowledge of balance more valuable than the secret of theft. The true bloom isn't a single flower, Advisor Lee. It's a healthy field. Advisor Lee nodded, a true smile touching his lips for the first time. Then prepare, Miss Lin. The governor's mandate will arrive by tomorrow. Your family's status is restored. Your methods will be protected. And, he added, tucking the damning ledger into his robe, those who sought to profit from poison and suffering will learn the weight of the law. As he left, a palpable, electric hope filled the Lin house. They were no longer petitioners, they were partners in restoration. Later, in the quiet of the garden, Kai approached May. The full moon was a sliver in the twilight sky, but growing. The moths will emerge soon, he said. We'll need a bigger enclosure, May replied, her mind already racing with plans, with partnerships to forge with other farming families, with treaties to be made with the river. Yes, Kai agreed. He was silent for a moment, watching the first fireflies blink over the recovered blossoms. You didn't just win a prize. You changed the game. May looked at him, at this fierce, quiet man who had become her steadfast ally. We did, she corrected gently. I couldn't have done it without you. Or Inoue. A rare, genuine expression softened Kai's stern features. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Then it seems we have a new field to tend, he said. And it's much larger than a garden. As darkness fell, the first, faint scent of the moon-fed blossoms filled the air, a promise, not a product. The true bloom had begun, and it was just getting started. Scandal, May discovered, was a weed that grew faster than any blossom. The damning ledger Inoue had saved became the spark that lit a fire through the dry tinder of the province's corruptions. Governor Zhang moved with a speed and ruthlessness that silenced any whispers about his previous inaction. The Jade River Consortium's operations in the Misty Peaks were raided by a company of the governor's personal guard, led by a grim-faced captain who took detailed notes on the cultivated rows and the makeshift barracks. The trafficker and Madame Fong were arrested in a tavern on the outskirts of the capital, their connections no longer a shield but a noose. The local magistrate, whose silence had been purchased, was stripped of his rank and sent to audit irrigation ditches in a distant, swampy prefecture. The Shin family's fate was more complex, but no less final. They were not arrested, but they were utterly bankrupted. A staggering series of fines for environmental degradation and commercial sabotage were levied, meticulously calculated to drain their coffers and force the sale of their lucrative indigo workshop to the governor's office, which immediately issued new, strict codes for runoff management. Old Master Shin retired overnight to a distant ancestral village, a broken man. Shin Jiao, his scholarly pretensions in ashes, was offered a brutal choice: accept a post as a junior clerk in the newly formed Provincial Agricultural Survey Office, reporting to a committee that would include May or be banished from Xingue entirely. His furious, humiliated acceptance was a more exquisite punishment than any exile. The Lin family's estate, once a place of silent dread, now hummed with purposeful energy. But it was no longer just their private sanctuary. Advisor Li had been true to his word. With the governor's mandate came resources, and with the mandate came a new, overwhelming reality: May was in charge. She stood now in the main garden, which was no longer a garden but a demonstration field. Around her, instead of just family and a few loyal servants, stood a crowd of 24 men and women from surrounding villages. They were farmers, herb gatherers, former tenants of the Shin family, their faces etched with skepticism, desperation, and a fragile hope. The old Wei saw the plant alone, May said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. She held up a vibrant aureate blossom from her recovered stalk. But the plant is not alone. It is a conversation. She pointed to the soil. With fungi that bring it nutrients. She gestured to the ferns interplanted between the rows. With companions that protect it from pests and shade its roots. She finally pointed to a screened enclosure, where the first rescued moonlight moths fluttered softly against the mesh, their silver wings catching the sun. And with a partner that gives it its soul. To grow this, you do not command. You orchestrate. An older farmer, his hands like gnarled roots, spat to the side. Pretty words, Mississippi. But my field is clay. My water is from the poisoned river. I have no silver for fancy rocks or time for fairy tales about moths. May nodded. Fair points. The lime and serpentine dust will be provided from the governor's stores, as part of the soil remediation fund. The river is being cleaned, the Shin workshop is now under new management. And the moths, she smiled. We are not keeping them. We are building a sanctuary. A communal hatchery. You will not buy moths, you will contribute to maintaining their home, and in return, they will visit your fields. This is not a single household secret. It is a community-shared resource. This was the radical core of her plan, fought for intense meetings with Advisor Li. She would not replace the consortium's monopoly with her own. She would dismantle the very idea of monopolizing nature. We start with the soil, she continued, walking over to the large, thriving compost heap. This is not waste. It is the foundation. We will teach you how to build it. How to read your land's needs. How to partner with it, not just mine it. Over the following days and weeks, the Lin estate transformed into the Verdant Wisdom Cooperative. Fu, the former cloud-gazing gardener's boy, now her head of field trials, led groups through the test plots, his shyness replaced by a passionate, detailed knowledge. Ingyue, with her fierce intelligence and newfound courage, managed the records of soil amendments and growth stages, her brushstrokes careful and clear. Lady Lin, to everyone's shock, found her calling in logistics and hospitality, organizing the feeding of the stream of visitors and managing the distribution of supplies with a ruthless efficiency that would have made a quartermaster weep. Master Lin advised on tradition and lineage, helping to document the old, nearly lost knowledge of the blossom's varieties, giving the scientific methods a vital cultural anchor. And Kai was everywhere and nowhere. He oversaw the security of the moth sanctuary with Nua as a silent, shaggy enforcer. He led expeditions to source materials, his knowledge of the mountains now an official asset. He built things sturdy frames for new enclosures, efficient tools for soil turning. He and May worked together daily, their communication often wordless, a pointed glance, a nod, the passing of a tool before it was asked for. One evening, after a long day establishing the cooperative's charter, they stood on the newly built moon-viewing platform that overlooked the now thriving gardens and the restored stretch of the Silver Serpent River. The first of the full moth emergence nights was approaching. You have built an army, Kai said quietly, gazing at the lanterns being lit in the cooperative's new study hall. Not an army, May corrected, leaning on the railing. An ecosystem. each part supporting the other. It's more resilient. He was silent for a moment. The governor's investigator asked me many questions. About the consortium guards. About my past. May looked at him. She had never asked. The trust between them had been built on present actions, not past histories. You don't have to tell me. I was a captain in the Imperial Falcon Guard, he said, the words coming out as if pulled from a deep well. My unit was assigned to protect a royal inspector investigating corruption in the Northern Timber Guilds. We were betrayed. Ambushed. My men died. The inspector died. I survived. He touched the scar on his face. The official inquiry needed a culprit. The guilds were too powerful. A failed guard captain was a convenient conclusion. I was dismissed in disgrace. The sheer, brutal injustice of it took May's breath away. It mirrored the smaller, local injustices she'd just helped dismantle: the convenient scapegoat, the powerful walking free. I came here to disappear, he said. To tend things that couldn't be lied to. Soil. Plants. Streams. He finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting the rising moon. Then you arrived. Talking of soil pH and indicting rivers. Dragging truth into places everyone had agreed to keep dark. I'm sorry, May said, though she wasn't sure for what: for disrupting his refuge, for the memories it stirred. Don't be. The words were firm. You were the first real thing I'd seen in years. Not a lie, not a pretty story. A problem to be solved. A truth to be defended. He paused. The investigator, he was from the Imperial Office of Agrarian Restoration. The scandal here has reached the capital. They are reviewing my case. It seems bearing witness for you has complicated the old, convenient story. Hope, fierce and bright, flared in May's chest for him. That's wonderful. It is uncertain, he said, a rare hint of vulnerability in his voice. But it is because of this. Because of what you built here. He gestured to the cooperative below. You didn't just save your family's garden, May. You gave a disgraced man a cause worth testifying for. The space between them on the platform felt charged, humming with the unsaid. The partnership of necessity had deepened into something profound, a mutual recognition of integrity forged in mud and moonlight. Down below, a messenger on a lathered horse clattered into the courtyard, calling for Advisor Lee. The moment broke, but the connection remained, solid as the stone beneath their feet. They descended to find Advisor Lee holding a sealed letter on heavy, cream-colored paper, stamped with an intricate seal May didn't recognize. He looked up as they approached, his expression a mix of awe and amusement. It seems your reputation has wings faster than your moths, Miss Lin. He handed her the letter. This arrived by Imperial courier. From the office of the Imperial botanist. May broke the seal with slightly trembling fingers. The script inside was elegant, precise, and deeply puzzling. To the cultivator Lin May, of the Verdant Wisdom Cooperative, Xingue Province, greetings. Your successful remediation of the Aureate Blossom Blight and your innovative methodologies concerning symbiotic pollinator restoration have come to our attention. The principles you articulate of systemic balance over forced extraction are of particular interest. We are currently contending with a paradoxical ailment affecting the celestial peach groves within the Imperial Gardens. The trees are vigorous, yet fruitless. Traditional methods have failed. The malady appears systemic, not pathogenic. We request your consultation, at your earliest convenience. Your perspective, rooted in practical ecology rather than purely esoteric tradition, may provide the key our learned halls have lacked. Formal invitations and arrangements for travel to the capital will follow. With scholarly respect, Yao, first botanist to the celestial throne. May looked up from the letter, her mind reeling. The Imperial Gardens. The celestial peaches. It was a universe away from her muddy plots and community meetings. Kai read the astonishment on her face. The problem is bigger, he stated. And further away, she breathed. Advisor Lee smiled. Your cooperative is established. The methods are in motion. The governor will ensure it thrives in your absence. It seems, Miss Lin, your talent for listening to plants has been heard in the highest of places. May looked at the letter, then at the thriving, lantern-lit cooperative below, then at Kai's steady, waiting gaze. The thought of the capital was terrifying. But the problem, a systemic, fruitless ailment in the heart of empire, called to the scientist in her, the part that loved a puzzle more than comfort. She had saved a garden, then a community's livelihood. Now, she was being asked to look at the emperor's orchard. She took a deep breath, the scent of her recovered blossoms mingling with the promise of distant, unknown trees. The roots she had planted here were deep and strong. They could support new growth, even in foreign soil. It seems, she said, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face, I have a new field to tend. The night of the full moon arrived, draped in a silence that felt less like an absence and more like a held breath. The entire Verdant Wisdom Cooperative, from the eldest, gnarled farmer to the youngest child clutching a parent's hand, gathered in the central courtyard of the Lynn estate. They stood in a wide circle around the moth sanctuary, a large, open-air pavilion of fine mesh and fragrant wood that housed the rescued cocoons and thriving beds of Baixing Sao. Lanterns were kept low and covered with blue glass, casting a cool, moonlight glow. No perfumes were worn, no loud talk permitted. It was less a ceremony and more a vigil, a collective act of witnessing. May stood at the entrance to the sanctuary, Kai a solid presence at her shoulder. In her hands, she held the small, lacquer box from the gala. Inside, nestled on velvet, were a single, perfect aureate blossom and beside it, a tiny, empty cocoon, a symbol of what had been lost and what was returning. We are not here to take, she said, her voice soft but carrying in the hushed space. We are here to witness a partnership older than any of our families. And to promise to be better stewards of it. As the moon crested the highest peak, bathing the courtyard in pure, silver light, the first cocoon stirred. A tiny crack appeared in the silvery gray shell. Then, a damp, crumpled creature emerged, unfolding itself with agonizing slowness. Wings, like crushed satin, began to pulse and expand, filling with fluid and strength. The silver powder dusting them caught the moonlight, making the moth look like a fragment of the night sky given life. One by one, all through the sanctuary, the cocoons opened. It was a silent, magical eruption. Dozens, then hundreds of moonlight moths unfolded into the world. They clung to the mesh, fanning their wings dry, their newly formed proboscises coiling and uncoiling. Then, as if hearing a silent bell, they took flight. They didn't swarm, they flowed. A river of living moonlight poured out of the sanctuary's opened panels. They rose in a gentle spiral above the heads of the awestruck crowd, their wings making a soft, papery whisper that was the only sound. For a moment, they formed a shimmering halo against the true moon. Then, they dispersed. Some fluttered towards the cooperative's demonstration fields, alighting on the waiting, open aureate blossoms. Others, in an act of wild, instinctive trust, drifted over the walls and into the night, towards the gardens and recovering plots of the gathered farmers. They were going to work. They were coming home. A collective sigh, filled with wonder and a profound, almost religious relief, passed through the crowd. An old woman wiped a tear from her cheek. The skeptical farmer with the gnarled hands simply nodded, his eyes wide. The balance, however fragile, had been restored. As the crowd began to murmur in soft, joyful tones, Advisor Lee approached May and Kai. He was not alone. With him was a man in the distinct, somber robes of the imperial bureaucracy, bearing the insignia of the Ministry of Justice. Miss Lin. Captain Shen, Advisor Lee said, a formal note in his voice. Captain. The title hung in the air. Kai went very still. The official from the Ministry of Justice unrolled a small scroll. By order of the Imperial Review Board, and based on new testimony and evidence pertaining to the Northern Timber Guild investigation and the recent actions in Xinhui Province, the dishonorable discharge of Captain Shen Kai is hereby vacated. The record is amended to reflect service terminated under honorable conditions, with commendation for integrity and civic duty in the defense of ecological and communal resources. The official handed the scroll to Kai. Your rank is not reinstated, as the Falcon Guard has its own protocols, but your name is cleared, Captain Shen. Any pensions or honors due will be calculated and disbursed. Kai took the scroll. His fingers tightened on the parchment, the only sign of the earthquake happening within him. He looked from the official to May, his eyes speaking volumes where his voice failed. The ghost that had haunted him for years had been laid to rest, not by a military decree, but by the stubborn, truth-telling work of tending a garden. Thank you, Kai said, the words thick. The Empire thanks you, the official replied with a bow. Your unique skills have been noted. With that, he and Advisor Lee melted back into the crowd, leaving them in a bubble of private triumph. May touched his arm, a brief, solid press of shared joy. Captain, she whispered, the title a gift. It was you, he murmured back. Their moment was interrupted by the Lin family, who descended upon them not with formal bows, but with a chaotic, heartfelt warmth. Lady Lin, her eyes shining, pressed a heavy, cloth-wrapped bundle into May's hands. For the journey. The best tea, and some salve I made. The capital air is harsh on the skin. Master Lin clasped May's hands. You have done more than restore our name, daughter. You have given it a new meaning. One I am proud to bear. He then turned to Kai and gave a deep, respectful nod, the head of a household acknowledging an equal. The cooperative is in good hands. Travel safely. Tao and Wei clapped Kai on the shoulder with a newfound, brotherly ease, offering gruff advice about capital inns and warning him to keep their sister from lecturing the emperor about compost. Yue clung to Mei, not crying, but with a fierce, desperate hold. You will write? About the peaches? And the strange capital insects? Every detail, Mei promised, hugging her close. And you will write to me about the first harvest from the shared fields. You are the record keeper now. It's a vital job. Fu stood shyly to the side, holding a carefully potted seedling, a cutting from the original resistant sprout Mei had found. For luck, he mumbled. So you remember where it started. The goodbyes were a sweet, aching tangle. But they were not endings, they were thresholds. The road to the capital was long, but it did not feel like an exile. It felt like an expansion. They traveled not as a noble lady and her guard, but as two consultants of the imperial botanist, with official papers and a modest escort. Mei spent the days observing the changing flora from the carriage window, taking notes, collecting soil samples at stops, her mind already grappling with the puzzle of the fruitless peach trees. Kai rode beside the carriage, his posture easier, the hunted look in his eyes replaced by a watchful calm. Sometimes, at night by the campfire, he would tell her of the capital, not the court intrigues, but the layout of the markets, the character of different districts, the best place to find tools that couldn't be found in a province. They spoke of the cooperative, of the moths, of Yue's latest letter, which had arrived just before they left, detailing the first confirmed pollination in old man Chen's field. They spoke of everything and nothing, the easy silence between them as comfortable as speech. On the final evening before they were to enter the great walls of the capital, they camped on a hill overlooking the sprawling, lantern-lit city. The scale of it was daunting, a world of stone and human ambition far removed from the misty mountains and fragrant river valleys. Are you ready? Kai asked, coming to stand beside her as she looked down at the empire's heart. Mei thought of her lab back in another life, of the dying garden she had first knelt in, of the terrified face of a cousin she'd saved, of the feel of healthy soil crumbling through her fingers, of the river of moss ascending on moonbeams. She was not the same person who had fallen from a modern world into a courtyard of despair. She was Lin Mei. A cultivator. A restorer. A scientist in a world of spirits. She had saved a legacy, then a community, then a man's honor. She had built something that would grow without her. She looked at the city, then at the stars above it, then at the man beside her who had chosen to walk this new, uncertain path with her. I'm ready, she said, and it was the truth. She wasn't going to the capital to seek favor or fortune. She was going to solve a problem. To listen to a tree that wouldn't fruit, and perhaps, in doing so, whisper to an empire about balance. The journey was over. The work, the real, endless, fascinating work, was just beginning. And for the first time, she wouldn't have to do it alone. She smiled, tucked the soil sample from the hillside into her bag, and turned towards the waiting city, her roots deep behind her, and the whole wide sky ahead.